we're not necessarily helping others who are suffering. So there are people, I say they're secretly sober or secretly suffering. I was that way. I mean, I suffered for, I don't know, 5 to 7 years thinking I couldn't have fun if I didn't drink. And I didn't get help because I was afraid I wasn't going to have fun. And then I started meeting people who weren't in recovery. They just, because of their religion, they didn't drink. And I started hanging around with them at work. And I'm like, wait, you guys are fun and you don't drink? Like, that was my first aha, because I'm like, if they're not drinking, they're having fun, maybe I can have fun too without alcohol.
Welcome to Into Action, brought to you by Touchstone Recovery Center. I'm Nolan Burchett, the Executive Director. Today, we're speaking with Laura Nelson, author and co-founder of Sober Life Rocks. I'm excited to have you on. Welcome, Laura. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is great. I appreciate it. My book just came out 2 weeks ago, so I'm super excited to talk about it. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, we're happy to hear about it. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write it and just a little bit about the book.
For sure. So I stopped drinking in 2020. I am a speaker. I am in the dental industry. I travel around to conferences and events. And when I stopped drinking was right before the pandemic and the world shut down. And so, of course, we were all stuck in our houses. And my husband is 19 years sober. And so it was easier for me to be sober in the sense that I wasn't traveling. I wasn't going to conferences. I wasn't at airports. I didn't have to deal with the societal pressures.
Yep.
And then we came out of this pandemic that was supposed to be like 2 weeks, and it was, we all know, 2 years or whatever. And I got back on the road, and I had a couple of years of sobriety under my belt. And I started going to conferences and to professional events and to meetings and to after hours dinners and things. And we can choose where we hang out on our personal life and who we hang out with in our personal life, but in our professional life, we don't always get those choices, right? We have to go to the dinners and the conferences and the events. And so I started going back on the road and seeing the peer pressure and seeing they don't even realize it, but just the alcohols, the connection, what we use for currency for connection, and people are pressuring and they don't realize it, but they're like, have a drink, have a drink. And I heard so many stories of people who relapsed or had a data point of going back at an event or conference and drinking again. And so I felt very alone. And I'd go back to my room and I was like, gosh, I'm coming to these meetings to connect with people and I'm not connecting because I'm going back to my room early because after the bar rolls out, So a year ago, I was at a conference and I was on a wellness panel and they had me on because I was talking about sobriety. And I asked in the room, how many people in here, it was a women's conference, how many people in the room consider themselves sober, soberish, or sober curious? And like 15-20% of the room raised their hand. Now, I have since gone through sobriety coaching. I've This Naked Mind Institute coach, so I can coach people on sobriety. I don't do that, but I know that when we have issues around shame, when we're hiding things, when we're not proud of things, that's worse for us, right?
Sure. Yep.
And then when I see 15% of the women raise their hand, but sort of like hidden, like sort of like kind of looking around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, am I the only one?
Yep.
That is the day that I was like, okay, we have to do something about this because, I believe we can help other people. We can help ourselves if you're comfortable to be able to show up and say, yeah, I don't drink for whatever reason. I've been in recovery. I'm in recovery. I religious reasons, health reasons. I just don't want to drink, right?
Yep.
But because we're hiding it and we're faking it and we're not showing up, other people aren't getting helped. And so I started Sober Life Rocks as a community just for professionals who are sober to feel celebrated and honored in their choices of sober living. And then I wrote the book because in order for the stigma to change in our professional world, we need meeting planners and event planners and HR people or anybody who's having a party, an event, to realize that they're excluding a good percentage of people who just don't want to drink or can't drink or prefer not to drink or decide not to drink, whatever your reason is. But they don't even, I'm having so much awareness of this from this book because they're like, I never even thought about it. I never even thought about it. And that's my goal with the book, was to get them to think about it.
Yeah, I think So I can relate to exactly what you're talking about. I used to work in the produce business, like in agriculture, and that in that world, drinking is like at the forefront of every
Uh-huh.
convention, of every party. Going to a work lunch, it's if you're not ordering a beer or a cocktail, you're out of place. And
Hmm.
so, like, I guess in the world that I live in now, working in treatment and being in recovery, like I'm in this bubble, right? So
Hmm.
my professional bubble is a bunch of people in recovery, and the people that I talk to every day and that I work with and our clients, like everyone's aware that we're in sobriety and that we're in recovery and that we're trying to maintain our sobriety. So it like when we go to work functions, there's no alcohol there. I mean, it's just kind of part of our lives now, and I think a lot of our clients that come through the treatment center, they're going to go back to their regular life. Like when they get a good foundation under them and they start going back to work, they're around it again. And that's
Hmm.
a big chunk of like the curriculum that we have in outpatient covers. What do we do moving forward? What are some healthy coping skills? And when this happens, how do I react? And I think
Hmm.
it would be very helpful if, first of all, if people are honest that they're in recovery, like, hey, I don't drink anymore. And you know I feel like people almost feel like they have to explain why, but that shouldn't be
Hmm.
the case,
And actually, that's my ultimate goal, what I would love, because in our community, we have people in recovery. We also have people who just never drank. They didn't like drinking, like they never had a problem. We have people who choose not to drink because of religion or health or whatever. I want to get to a point where people don't have to explain what's in their cup when they don't. And I understand, like my husband went through AA. I understand. I don't consider myself in a program or in recovery, but I did recover my life, right? And I shouldn't have to explain to anybody why I drink or don't drink. But the issue is it's real. We do get the like, why aren't you drinking? Are you pregnant? I mean, you probably never had that question, but are you pregnant or why aren't you drinking? And it's like, why do you care? Right? You don't care why I don't eat mayonnaise. You don't care why but it's just so normalized. And if the meeting planners, I mean, the issue with these events is they don't know what to do but throw alcohol at it. So the evening events are all around the alcohol. And it's like, well, no, you can actually structure your meeting so that we can have other things involved in the evening and have alcohol. Just don't make it we're not saying alcohol is going to go away. It's part of life, but don't make it the main part of the event.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. A lot of people that are coming into treatment are, some, I'd say 80% struggle with alcohol,
Mhm.
maybe even upwards of 80%. So alcohol it's something that a lot of people struggle with. When you're addicted to heroin and you get clean, you don't have to explain why you don't do heroin anymore. That's
Exactly.
it's not a thing. People just, oh, well, that's great that you don't do heroin anymore. But if
Exactly.
you stop drinking, it's like you have to have this story about why, or at least I know when I first got clean and sober, I felt like I had to explain why. And it
Mhm.
came to a point where I just wore it like a badge. Like, hey, I'm in recovery. I
Mhm.
don't
Mhm.
drink. I'm better without it.
Mhm.
And I had to be like really assertive because when I
Uh-huh.
wasn't, I would give in and I would be one of those people that would relapse during the holidays or I would relapse and not tell anyone. And then,
Yeah.
until I could wear it like a badge, it was really hard for me to stay sober.
I think the thing is too is that by normalizing this discussion, by bringing it to podcasts like this, by bringing it to people in industry events and just everyone to realize that you don't have to hit rock bottom to assess your relationship with alcohol. And like you said, like alcohol is just the most prevalent part of our society. And it is the drug where people are like, you don't do that? Like,
Hmm.
why don't you do that? They wouldn't do that about heroin, right?
Yeah.
So it's real, it's everywhere. But I want to get those to realize that it's alcohol use disorder, and anyone who has ever drank for the wrong reason, woke up hungover, drank too much, you're on the spectrum. Now, you might not be rock bottom. You might not have to go to rehab. You may not consider yourself an alcoholic or have a problem, but alcohol is a drug, right? It is what it is. So if we can recognize that the discussion should be happening and people can make their own choices, whatever it is. However, there are people who are not drinking, not because they're in recovery. They're just not drinking alcohol because they don't like it or they never did, but they're hiding it by getting a cup and putting a lime on it and walking around acting like they're drinking because that's the expectation. Well, for someone like you and I, it would be hard for me to walk around with something that looks like alcohol because that could be triggering. So I'm really careful of that. My husband's very careful of that. So if we can get like the normal people who aren't drinking to realize like it's okay not to drink, the meeting planners to say not everybody wants to drink, that is going to help everybody also in recovery because it's not going to be such the prevalent discussion. It's not going to be such the prevalent part of things, which is going to help everybody all around because ultimately we know it's not good for you. It's a poison. So we shouldn't have to have it, right? It shouldn't be
Sure.
forced down our throats, no pun intended.
Yeah, I think most of the like after parties or conventions that I went to, it was the norm to just go get drunk and to usually get a little out of hand and come a lot of times it wouldn't end pretty, but it was acceptable. That was almost like people expected
Expected.
the young professionals to go and make a fool of himself, and then they'd talk about it at the next convention and it would happen again. And
Yep.
I think now what I struggle most with like around the holidays and during events is because I enjoy being sober, and I think being around loved ones, especially who aren't, like people who I care about and that I know really well, being around them when they're inebriated and like more than just a little tipsy, it's hard for me. I can't really stomach it. So
Yeah.
it makes it to where I tend to leave most parties early. I go home pretty
Mhm.
quickly. I think if the event or the family get together were structured a little better and like
Mhm.
had a plan to it,
Mhm.
a lot of those interactions would be avoidable or maybe wouldn't happen.
I think the thing too is that if we can start to realize that our events don't have to be centered around alcohol, um, there are people in our world that would probably drink less or not drink at all, or maybe just have a drink and then stop. And when the other people in the event get inebriated, if you and I were at a business event and I knew you didn't drink, you knew I didn't drink because we weren't hiding it, we weren't well, we might stick around and talk and network for like an extra hour, or somebody who might say, you know what, I'm gonna have one glass of wine and then I'm gonna stop because I'm in a business function or whatever. They're going to remember the conversations we have. They're going to hang out. But because we keep this such a hidden part of our professional lives, unless you get pushed and then you're like, you have the badge that says I'm sober and I'm proud of it, we keep it quiet. Well, and I get it. Like if you are gone through recovery and you're working through the steps, I get that. But like there are a lot of people who just don't want to drink, who never had to get there. So let's just make it okay for them not to drink and us not to drink and other people not to drink. And then there'll be a point where it's kind of like I have this thing where there's the conferences will do mocktails. And mocktails are fine, but they're usually sticky sweet. I never drink cocktails when I drink alcohol, so I'm not going to drink your mocktail anyway, right? But I was at a conference and they had a mocktail thing, and I was like, okay, cool. We're making steps in the right direction. At least they're advertising mocktails. Well, come to find out, they had the mocktails from 2 to 3, and happy hour started at 4:30. And I said, why do you guys have the mocktails from 2 to 3 and happy hour starts at 4:30? And they said, we don't want to mix the two together. For me, I'm like the mocktails are meant to be for those of us who don't drink, to have something to drink during happy hour. And the analogy that I gave and I talk about is that that's like telling the vegans and the vegetarians your lunch or your dinner is going to be served at 3 because we don't want to mix you with the meat eaters, right? That's in for us, that just doesn't make any sense. So 10 years ago, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, you had to go to a special table at a conference to get your food. It had to be, but now they just serve it. They ask you when you go to a
It's
conference,
an
like,
option. Yeah.
what's your food options, right? I think we're going to get there when it comes to alcohol, but it needs to be the same thing. It needs to be we need to make sure that we're pushing events and meeting planners, because there's a lot of people who are just like, I never even thought, because we're so quiet about it and because we just kind of fade to the side when alcohol comes out. And if we can get enough people to say, I don't want alcohol either, right? I don't want to do it either. Then we could get the meetings and the events and the meeting planners to pay attention.
Yeah. So what are some good examples of just sober friendly company parties, company get-togethers that you've been a part of?
So I write about all this in the book. So a lot of people who feel like they're sober friendly event planners or events, they give us mocktails. Like that's just the thing, right? And I just did a social post about this. An adult beverage doesn't have to have alcohol in it, right? You can have an adult beverage and it could be a nice drink, whatever it is. And I don't think adult beverages come out of a spout, and they're not usually lemonade, but that's what they call like the mocktail. It's like the kids' table, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the first thing is just really thinking about what is everybody drinking, and give some similar types of drinks that are just don't have alcohol, right?
Sure.
Like have better options than just Coke or Sprite. The other thing is making sure that people who are coming to your event realize that there's sober friendly options, that everyone's going to feel included into the event, because we have actually in our community, Sober Life Rocks, we have the president of the ADA, the American Dental Association, and he is sober and clean and talks about it from the podium, it's amazing. He's like 25 years sober and clean. And he's the president of ADA, which is like, people are like, whoa, what is that? Right. And he talks about it on our podcast where he says, when you walk into a room, if you know somebody else is sober, you're not alone. If I know I can go in and you're there and I'm there, I'm no longer alone. I'm no longer the one person who's like, well, everyone's drinking, because we're all faking it, right? So making your people who are coming to your event, your dinner, your business meeting, whatever, after hours, know that they're going to be welcome and they're not alone, right?
Yeah.
Then look at the actual event. What's the programming around the event? Are we all just standing around a bar? Like, is that the thing we're doing? Find something else, like a game, a comedian, a magician, a band, karaoke,
Sure.
a scavenger hunt. Like, have us doing something. That doesn't mean the alcohol can't be there, but just don't make the alcohol the event.
Yeah.
And then lastly, and I have a lot more than lastly, that's just lastly now, my book covers a lot more. Look at where you're hosting it. Look at the space, because maybe you have the loud DJ and the music and the bar and stuff, and that's great. But some of us who are sober, after a little while, we're like, that's loud and I'm tired and I don't want to hear anymore. It doesn't mean we have to leave. Just have some furniture outside that space where we can sit and talk and we can still hear the music, and I can run in if I like a song, but I don't have to be in the chaotic party. Don't have it standing around at a bar. Have it at a outdoor venue where there is a bar, but we're all just not standing at the bar. So just really kind of looking at the space that you're hosting your event to. Maybe not a winery, maybe not a brewery. Like, think about people who just potentially would prefer not to be in those space, and find a space that's comfortable for everyone.
Yeah, it sounds just like a little bit of attention to detail goes a really long way. Mm-hmm. And like sure. putting some thought, because I mean I've put together a couple of holiday parties, and I'm guilty of like last minute, okay, this is what's available, this is what we're doing. So like I can understand that, like taking a little bit of extra time and effort and like, putting some thought into what the activity is going to be, that could be very helpful. The last couple of years, coming up next week, and then last year, for my Touchstone staff, we do a holiday party, and we're doing exactly what you're talking about. So we're having it outdoors, we are having karaoke, we're doing like a gift exchange. And I mean, it's a little easier knowing that 99% of us don't drink. So, we don't really have to gear anything towards sobriety. We just are all sober. Mm-hmm. But those are the last year was probably the most fun I've ever had at a holiday party. Mm-hmm. And just, hanging out, trying to do karaoke sober, that takes guts. That
Yeah, no,
takes
that's
guts.
one thing I gave up when I stopped drinking. I was like, that was one thing you'll never see me karaoke again. Never
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really tough to get up on that stage when you don't have the liquid courage, but it's worth
Yeah.
it. Like once you try it.
I think that by having this discussion too, like you're in a an ecosystem where sobriety is just the norm of where you work, right? And so you're used to talking about it and stuff. But for other professionals who that's not the norm or where they are, we tend to keep it quiet. And so what I feel is that we're not necessarily helping others who are suffering. So there are people I say they're secretly sober or secretly suffering. I was that way. I mean, I suffered for, I don't know, 5 to 7 years thinking I couldn't have fun if I didn't drink. And I didn't get help because I was afraid I wasn't going to have fun. And then I started meeting people who weren't in recovery. They just, because of their religion, they didn't drink. And I started hanging around with them at work. And I'm like, wait, you guys are fun and you don't drink? Like, that was my first aha because I'm like, if they're not drinking and they're having fun, maybe I can have fun too without alcohol, not having any idea how great it would be on the other side. But if we can share it, like that's one of the things for me. And I know that there's a lot of opinions on if you should stay quiet or talk about it. I've shouted it from the mountaintops since the first day because I'm very proud of the fact that I've overcome this addiction. And this was one of the biggest successes I've ever had in my life. And I don't want people to not know. And I'm not saying everybody has to be sober. I'm just saying I'm having fun and you can too. And hang out with us if you want. It's okay. If you don't want to drink, it's okay if you drink. I don't really care. Just don't force it on me and give me a better environment so that I don't feel like that's the only thing that we're doing.
Sure, I can relate to that. I think I see a lot of people come through treatment that maybe work in the produce business like I used to, and like knowing when they get done with treatment and when they go back to their profession, knowing that they're going to keep it a secret always worries me because I feel like, well, first of all, you talked about shame earlier, and I mean that is just evidence that like that person may or may not be very proud of themselves and like what they've overcome, which you should be, in my opinion. So
Right.
like I was one to keep it a secret unless I wasn't staying sober. Like I tried to keep
Right.
it a secret when I didn't want to be a phony.
Held to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but I mean, but I'm sure there are people, and I actually know a couple that, they keep it pretty private and they don't drink, but that's really not the norm, at least in my world. So yeah, I can relate to that. I think being vocal about it and being proud of overcoming that addiction is really important. And it,
Well, the other thing too is I have somebody who's in our community who I don't know if she's still sober or not. She tried it for a while and she's, curious, I think, but she said to me when she joined up with us, because we're not here to get people sober. We're here on the professional side of like just do life. She said to me, I don't want to be the poster child of sober life rocks. And I'm like, don't worry, I am. Like that's the whole point is like you can decide to do you. But I was just at an event and a lady came up to me and she said, I want to thank you. She said, I didn't drink last night at the event because you gave me permission. I didn't know that lady. I didn't know her at all. But because I was on stage the day before and talking about like we need to just allow people to be people and choose what they want and have better events,
sure,
something talked to her subconscious. And I don't know if she has a problem with alcohol. I don't know where she is on the spectrum, but she thanked me for making it okay for her not to drink.
yeah,
I think that's amazing, right? That doesn't mean I don't know her relationship with alcohol, but she has one enough that she thought twice last night and didn't drink because something was said. And that's, we're battling the big alcohol and the billboards that are like, you're going to be rich and sexy and famous if you drink and your life is going to be amazing. And we all know that that's not true, but we're chasing that dream. Let's put out there other realities of where you can also have a life without it. And it can be amazing also.
sure. I've noticed, at least post alcohol in my life, there's so much more healthy activity.
Uh-huh.
Like I can go to a conference or a business meeting on a Friday night, and I can wake up on Saturday and go on a jog. When I
Mm-hmm.
was drinking, there's
Yep.
absolutely no way that I was even getting out of bed before noon on
Yep.
Saturday. So
Yeah.
it seems like it's opened up opportunities, first of all, but then also so much time. Like my at least the way that I drank, it was a time suck. Like I spent so much time and effort either getting the way that I wanted to feel or soaking in it or getting over the way that I felt the day before. It was a time suck. And it
mine was that also. Mine was more of mental energy that I spent on how much should I drink? Who's going to be there? Where do we eat? Because there's alcohol. When, like, what kind of alcohol should I take? Do I take, like, I spent so much mental energy around planning and planning the next day because I'm going to be tired or hungover that I was like, if I just got to the point where I was like, if I just can't control it, it's better to get it out of my life because I have so much more energy just to do things that I care about, like you're saying,
sure.
because I spent so much brain power on it. It was ridiculous, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was not only a time suck, but I mean, so when a person is in treatment, they'll a lot of times a lot of treatment centers will have them do like a cost analysis. So how much money did we spend on our drug of choice? And I mean, even people that all they use is alcohol, it is significant. Like the
Right.
amount of money a person will spend in the course of a year, let alone a decade, on
Mhm.
on their habit. So it's so nice now also, like going to dinner with my wife and ordering whatever we want. And like the bill is $100. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Or maybe
Yeah.
two if we get crazy. But
Yeah.
when you add cocktails and wine or whatever your poison is to that,
Yeah.
it doubles it.
Yeah. I would say another financial thing that is that I talk about with meeting planners and just realizing that a lot of times, so we can get content online. Like people are listening to this or watching this podcast, they can get all the research or the stuff they need online. We go to events for connection.
Yep.
So we go to events to hang out with people, to get to know people and such. And when you're spending money as a business owner to bring people together, we're hoping that they get filled up. Like we're trying to help our sales team get better, or we're getting our team members bonded or whatever. We're hoping to fill them up. But when we're spending all this money to get them there and then they're indulging on alcohol and food and not getting rest and not eating well or going to the gym and not going
Sure.
outside, and then potentially doing things that morally maybe they shouldn't be doing at a business event,
Sure.
and then we're sending them home, we're actually doing a disservice to them because we're draining them and we're draining your bank account as a business because you just spent all this money and time to get these people here. And the idea is to fill them up and you just send them home exhausted and maybe in a lawsuit, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So there's a cost in general, and again, meeting planners and owners, they want people to come, but they are like, don't know what to do. So let's give them a bigger bar. Let's give them higher liquor.
Yep.
Let's do a longer bar. That's not the answer, because people don't necessarily want the alcohol. The younger generation, this is not their drug of choice. And they don't want it. They want to go for the event. They want to go for the connection. They don't want to go for the alcohol. So it's time to kind of change that whole mentality around the importance of alcohol at these things.
Yeah, I agree with you. So do you have any suggestions, or does your book cover it all, like smaller family get-togethers, stuff like that? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because like I said earlier, that is what I struggle most with now, is like,
Uh-huh.
going to these family get-togethers where most of the people that I love are still drinking, some of them to excess, some of them not. But, it's just, they're difficult get-togethers for me still. And I mean, I've been sober for years. So
Right.
anyway,
Well, my book is targeted to the meeting planner, not to there's a lot of resources out there of like, how do we have an exit plan, drink your own drinks, like all the things, right? Which I still agree with. But my book is targeted to the person who's hosting the event. And my
okay.
book is free to download on my website. So my suggestion would be is, yes, we got to show up. We need an exit plan. We need our backup, our drinks. We need all of that. But could we let the meeting planner or the person who's hosting your holiday party or the whoever have an insight into what it's like for somebody showing up who doesn't want to drink? So I would say for Christmas, give them my book, or you can, give them a hard copy, give them the link. a lot of what I'm finding for the people who are reading the book who hadn't thought about it is they hadn't even thought about it.
Sure.
They hadn't even, and if you bring it up and you're saying it to a family member, maybe that becomes a weird personal thing, or, oh, it's just you because that's how you are. But give them the book or give them a link or just say, hey, and I specifically named the book The Inclusive Event Planner. It doesn't say how to throw a sober party, because you do that, we're going to eliminate 80% of the people who are coming to your party, right? It's an
Sure.
inclusive party. And then how to make it sober friendly, because we all used alcohol for whatever crutch we used alcohol for. And if we're not using that crutch anymore, what do we want the parties to feel and be like and have and offer? Because we don't have the alcohol. And a lot of us use the alcohol because networking is hard to do. Walking into a room full of people you don't know is hard to do. Walking into a room full of your family members is hard to do. That's why we use the alcohol. So for somebody who cares about people showing up to their 20-person family event or 2,000-person meeting, I would hope they want everyone to have a good time.
Yeah.
And having a good time means also recognizing maybe there's some better options for people who don't drink. And so my suggestion is everybody listens to this, give them a copy of my book and just be like, here, you should read this. This is about having a great event. And hopefully I can explain to them why they need to have better options at their parties.
Yeah, that makes sense. Having like hosting a sober party is kind of what I do for our holiday parties for my company. Is, you know, knowing that everyone's sober makes it so much easier. But like having an inclusive party, you're probably right. About 80% of the people at most parties are going to indulge in some way, shape, or form. That leaves a whole lot of us that aren't. So putting some thought and effort into it it's necessary. I really hope that your book like catches fire and that people actually start doing that, because it'll affect my life in a positive way. I know that.
Well, I hope my book catches fire too. That's my whole goal, because Sober Life Rocks, our community, is a community for professionals, and that's awesome. But what I want to do is I want to get out on like main press and news and podcasts and get the people who aren't on our side of the life on this subject to recognize that there is an inclusion piece that's missing.
Sure.
They ask what kind of food we're allergic to. I also want them to know, like, there's going to be people coming to your conference that don't drink. Now, my ask for people who are on our side of sober choices is to realize that if we don't ask for better options, we're not going to get them. And so, and it's a money game, right? So a conference center or a hotel, you see it now in restaurants. They have non-alcoholic options. They have mocktail options. Restaurants are getting it, right? The big alcohol's now coming out with like alcohol-free options, which
Yeah.
is great, right? Because we have better options. But the hotel and conference centers aren't there yet. And if we don't have enough people that show up to say, I want better sober options, right?
Yeah.
Then they're not going to sell, they're not going to make any money, and they're not going to buy their products, and they're going to expire. So it's kind of we need to have enough people who are like, I support this. And then enough of us pushing out to the main, hotels, conferences, event planning places to go, this is needed and this is necessary.
Yeah. So how do we get your book? Do we go to soberliferocks.com? Tell us how to get it.
Yep. So soberliferocks.com would get you to the book, but also you can go to just the Inclusive Event Planner. That's right where, so Sober Life Rocks is our community. If you're a professional listening to this or on LinkedIn, we have a sober community on LinkedIn. That's where professionals sort of hang out. That's why I built it over there. So you can join our group there. That's where we're having this discussion. Sober Life Rocks is our community. We're not here to get you sober, but when you get out of, treatment and you want daily emails of just doing life sober, that's what we provide at Sober Life Rocks, because we all get back on the road and do our lives and our jobs. And then the Inclusive Event Planner, just go to that website. You can download the book for free, or there's a link to buy it, but you can share it to anyone in your world that you're like, hey, I would love for you to read this. This would help make my life better and many people around us to be more inclusive.
Well, thank you so much for being on today, Laura. I really appreciate the hard work you're doing and making these parties inclusive and like educating people about that it's okay to be sober. Like you don't have anything to be ashamed of. There's a lot of us, and yeah, I just want to thank you for being on today.
Thank you. And I would say for everybody, you should hold that badge of honor. You don't have to shout from the mountaintops, but for all of us who've overcome this addiction, you should be proud of that. And just recognize it's one of the hardest things we have to go through, but it's so good on the other side. So congratulations for anyone listening to this.
I agree with that. Thank you, Laura. You have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.